Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
Afghanistan is the latest travel guide from Bradt, the first travel guidebook to the country from a mainstream publisher in almost 20 years. Delighted to say that joining me live on the line, I don't think from downtown in Kabul, but I could be wrong, is the man behind the new travel guide for Afghanistan, and that man is James Willcox. James, good morning to you, sir.
Morning, Giles. No, I'm not in Kabul. I'm in London today.
Right, super. Now, this is when this first landed on my desk. We get lots of press notes about saying, okay, on Friday you'll be talking about. And normally it's like Venice or Uruguay or some other destination. Afghanistan. I mean, to say that my eyebrow was raised and my flabber was garsted. Am I not the only one thinking why are people? Can people even go to Afghanistan? Explain a little bit about your background and how you're so sort of eminent qualified to write this.
Well, first of all, you're right to think that because your experience of what you know from Afghanistan has only come from the news and the conflict and from one aspect. So the fact that that's your impression of Afghanistan is most people's impression around the world. For me, it's quite different because since 2007, I've been traveling to Afghanistan 2 or 3 times a year, and I've been organizing travel and logistics, primarily for tourists, but also for professional people like documentary makers, journalists, researchers. And so over that period of time, Hilary Bradt, who's the founder and owner of Bradt Guides, I've been bugging her on and off to write a guidebook for Afghanistan. And eventually she relented. And so I got to visit a lot of little places that I hadn't visited before in the country over the past couple of years, as well as that wealth of experience of nearly the last 20 years of travelling there.
Because people are going to say this first question, isn't it dangerous? I mean, that's going to be, surely you must be, sick of people asking you that question, James, but people are going to go, because again, we get our, you say Afghanistan, you think basically that it is basically filled with, people with, grinding their teeth with rocket-propelled guerrillas leaping out of caves at every turn.
Well, this is the thing. Everything you see on the news, the news media is true because that's what the news media does. It tells you new events and things that are interesting. And my example is if all we ever did was take the news media for the United States as what the US is like, no one would ever go there because it's just full of school shootings and horrendous things happening all the time. But we absorb US culture. We have friends that go to the US. We go to the US. We know it's much there's much more things going on there than just the things we see in the news. And Afghanistan's exactly the same. There are risks to travel there. There are people with extremist views. There are anti-government groups and insurgency groups. But as well as that, there's 30 million people going around their everyday lives, falling in love, going shopping, visiting incredible sites. And so we work in a way, we specialise in places where there can be a perceived security risk or there is a increased security risk. So we sometimes have to work in specific ways. But yes, there are risks, but we work hard to reduce those risks.
And of course, if anybody's seen, The Kite Runner, and I believe, anybody who hasn't seen or read the book should go and see it, and read it. But I mean, this is a country which had a very Western flavour in the 60s and 70s. And of course, if you like your history, Afghanistan is absolutely a crucial, because of its strategic position for centuries, nay millennia. Afghanistan has been basically had imprints and footprints of every great civilization.
Absolutely. Until your neighbours, the Portuguese, came up with the compass and moved goods from the Far East by sea, Afghanistan was the centre of the trade route. It was the centre of the route between East and West. This is like Marco Polo. This is Ibn Battuta. These are the people that travelled between the two. And Afghanistan was the centre of that. And one example of that, I was lucky when I was doing the research to go to these lapis lazuli mines in Sari Sang. And the blue, they've been mined for 6,000 years. So the blue on Tutankhamun's head mask, the blue pigment on the roof of the Sistine Chapel. This is all the blue because in the ancient world, there wasn't a blue pigment. It's a really unnatural colour. And it all came from this mine in Sari Sang. So, 4,000 years BC, Afghanistan was the centre of so much that was going on. Even in the Roman, even 2,000 years ago, it was the centre of the world. But that's changed. Now it's the backwater. It's the least developed country in Asia.
Yeah, didn't Alexander the Great end up there? That's about as further as he's got as he's trying to take over the world. And he gets to Afghanistan and his mates go, right, this is the ultimate boys trip, but we've done Mesopotamia and we've got to Afghanistan. I think, I could really go back and have a warm shower now.
Absolutely. Well, Kandahar, which we've all heard of, is a bastardization of Sikandar. Sikandar is like the Arab name of Alexander the Great. So Kandahar is named after Alexander the Great. He famously crossed the Hindu Kush in the middle of winter to surprise a guy called Bessus, who was the Persian leader at the time. And near Mazar-e-Sharif, there's a city called Balkh, and he married Roxanne there, who was reportedly the most beautiful woman in Asia. So Alexander the Great sort of echoes throughout the history of Afghanistan.
What's the nuts and bolts then? What do you need? I mean, apart from obviously a guidebook and obviously employing the services of somebody like yourself is presumably a first step. But I mean, I can't just get on an EasyJet and land in Kabul, can I? So what are the actual restrictions and what should you have before you kind of go?
Well, one of the things that's interesting about Afghanistan is the Taliban are not internationally recognized by, I think Russia's recognized the Taliban as the government, but that's the only country that has. So the embassies, the one in, I don't know about Spain, but the one in London, in Kensington, it's closed essentially because the Taliban haven't put their staff there. So to get a visa, you need to go to one of the neighboring countries where they do have staff. So you'd have to go to the UAE, or you'd have to go to Pakistan, or you'd have to go somewhere, get the visa, and then essentially once you get there, you turn up, and it's an extremely complicated process. And I don't have to bore your listeners, but you need to get various permissions to visit different provinces.
Right. And
if you're going to do anything in that province, you have to, report to the local ministry, and then you can travel around and travel freely after that.
And we talk about this sort of I'll just do one more bit of history, because as you can probably tell, I'm a bit of a history nut. But presumably, you talk about, lapis lazuli mines. That's got me going straight off. But again, we kind of think the whole place was the Taliban sort of laid waste to anything that was, before year zero, as it was. But presumably, it's a big country. It's difficult to get around with. Hence the fact that, the Afghans have been fiercely independent for millennia. But presumably, there are historical sites that haven't been commercialized in the way that many European sites have, for example.
Well, absolutely. Nowhere's commercialized in Afghanistan, not in the way that we would see it in the West. But yeah, another example of that, there's a huge number of Buddhist stupas in Afghanistan that are largely remained untouched, because Buddhism spread from India to China, not straight across, not directly north, because the Himalayas are in the way, but it went through Central Asia and through Afghanistan. And a lot of these stupas are left untouched because the people didn't know what they were. They were just these big mounds, and they reported them to be, the thrones of these ancient Persian kings. And so you get all of those kind of things. But you're completely right. All of the stuff that you go and see is completely uncommercialized, and you really get that kind of raw, authentic experience when you travel there.
When you're thinking as well of Afghanistan, you think we tend to think dusty, full-beating, big mountains, the whole thing. But again, it's a country. There are going to be geographical variations. Are we talking sort of pine forest, rhododendron forests on the lower slopes of places? What's the actual, lakes, that sort of thing? What are we looking at here?
Well, Afghanistan sits sort of beyond the monsoon. So when you go to Pakistan, India and Pakistan are quite lush because the monsoon gets as far as the mountains. Once it hits the mountains, that's the end of it. So you've got this extremely dry climate, which you get in Central Asia, but it's watered by the Himalaya and the Hindu Kush, some of these great glaciers. So it's quite barren. Either the deserts or the mountains are quite barren. But once you get into the areas that are irrigated, it's extremely lush. And that dryness creates an incredible fruit, for example, like the melons, the grapes, all of this stuff in the autumn is quite incredible. Because it's a dry climate with a lot of heat and a lot of cold water, it's the perfect sort of conditions for them.
And here's the I never thought about, what's Afghani food like? What's the cuisine like?
I would say, again, I love Central Asia, all of Central Asia, because everyone has an idea what the subcontinent, what India's like, and you have an idea what East Asia and China's like. You have an idea what the Middle East is like, and you have an idea what Russia's like. But of course, there's a part of the world where they all touch, and that's Central Asia. And so they have a little bit of an influence from everywhere. So, for example, in Afghanistan, people drink green tea, but they really eat kebabs. Like, the food you would think would be kind of a bit Turkish is the closest thing most people would have had. But people could drink green tea rather than black tea. and people wear sort of shalwar kameez, the long baggy pants and long kind of shirt that you see Pakistani men wear. That's the sort of typical dress. So Afghanistan is this kind of cross between, it's the crossroads of Asia. It's this cross between all of these different cultures and these different foods and these different sort of clothing.
And if you are of our generation, our parents always had that one friend who'd come back from Afghanistan and had those baggy trousers, didn't they? Because they were all, we used to call them what's-it catchers back in the day. But they are, it is that sort of, it was part of the hippie trail, wasn't it, Afghanistan, very much in the 60s and 70s?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the sort of heyday of tourism. And you had John Lennon wearing a sort of Afghan jacket and all of this kind of stuff. Yeah, people would go to the hippie trail was all the way to Kathmandu, but I think people often lingered in Afghanistan because it's just a sort of interesting, slightly wild, loose kind of, weirdly sort of loose kind of place. Like the government never has, even under the government now, which is, one of the most sort of severe governments in the world, the government can only extend so far because it's full of mountains, because it's full of villages, and because people are quite independent. There's a certain amount of sort of freewheeling goes on in Afghanistan.
Here's a question. These are both completely sort of like curveballs for you, so brace yourself, mate. Two questions to this. Afghan coats. I mean, you did mention John Lennon and an Afghan coat. I mean, can you pick up an Afghan coat in Afghanistan? I know it sounds silly, but
it's not a traditional thing that people wear. However, there's a street in Kabul called Chicken Street, which is where the hippies used to sort of hang out. There's no chickens there anymore, but it has sort of what goes by sort of souvenirs and jewellery and stuff made of lapis lazuli, as we talked on before. And there's one shop there that sells what you would describe as Afghan coats. It still manages to sell them to anyone that wants to buy them.
You know how people go away and here's another good left for you. You know how people go away and they come back with a fridge magnet from where they've been. I mean, can you come back with a piece of lapis lazuli? I mean, are you allowed to take stuff out of the country? Is that okay?
It depends what it is.
Yeah.
In fact, the lapis is a very good example because you can take like a piece of polished lapis out, as in it's been worked into something. So if a chess piece or a piece of jewellery or something, but you're not supposed to take raw lapis out because it's a mineral. And without getting too political, there's a lot of mineral wealth under Afghanistan. They've signed a lot of deals with China to exploit that mineral wealth. And so anything to do with mines is actually quite tricky. So it's actually quite tricky to get the permission to go and see those lapis mines. But anything to do with mining and minerals is quite a political sort of.
But if I want to pick up a piece of jewellery, for example, for my beloved, or I fancy myself a lapis ring, that's not a problem because you can pick one of those things.
Absolutely no problem at all. Absolutely. All jewellery. There's a lot of precious. There's emeralds, there's rubies, and there are lots of semi-precious stones like agates and things. That sort of stuff is a great souvenir from Afghanistan.
And we got a lot of listeners who are like animal mad. Afghan hounds, I mean, is the thing in the name? Do you see long-haired, rather sort of like pampered-looking pooches around the place?
I've never seen an Afghan hound in Afghanistan. I mean, they must exist somewhere.
They're not roaming packs across the street, coming down the Khyber. That was my image.
I mean, traditionally, the concept of keeping a dog as a pet just doesn't really exist in a lot of Islamic culture, but certainly in Afghanistan. I mean, the only dogs that I've ever met are these huge mastiffs that people who live in rural communities have to protect their sheep from wolves that are quite intimidating. But they're very different to the sleek Afghan hound, that's for sure.
Is it because, I mean, goats, presumably, I mean, they play an important part in Afghanistan, presumably food, but also sport. Now, and it's not goat racing, is it? It's something a bit more. And if you haven't had your cornflakes at the moment, listeners, then turn the radio down for a second, because there's a sport involving a goat that doesn't, it's not good for the goat.
Yeah, so the national sport of Afghanistan is a game called buzkashi, which literally translates as "get the goat." A buz is a goat, and it's played on the way to describe it. It's kind of like a game of rugby, or one of those like old sort of public school games where they play it against the wall. This kind of where there's just basically a scrum for most of it, but it's played on horseback. and instead of a ball, there's a dead goat that's been quartered and been salted to make it hard. And so each team has to try and get the goat, drop it in a circle, and then they get a point, and then they just start all over again. And beyond that, there's very few rules. So there's a lot of hitting each other with whips. There's a lot of wrestling, trying to tip people out the saddles. Like it's a brutal game, and it's always quite hard. There's no team colours or anything like that. Right. People just wear sorts of random bits of clothing to wear it, but it's fantastic to watch.
You don't have sort of like a team like the Kabuli goat thrashers against the
No,
okay, right.
No, there's no Premier League. There's no Buzkashi Premier League.
Damn.
And it's very hard to work out really what's going on, who's playing who. Traditionally, someone important, like a commander or political figure, would sort of pay to have it. A bit like the games in Rome or something like that. They'd pay two teams to play to give people entertainment. But yeah, it's played in the winter. So if anyone is in Afghanistan in the winter, it's always worth trying to catch a game.
Climate extremes. Talking of winter, I mean, is it like blisteringly hot in summer and freezing up in the mountains? Obviously, because it is the mountains. I mean, what is it temperate? What are we looking at here?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, you've got, the highest peak in Afghanistan is 7,800 meters. So that's it's bigger than anything in South America. It's bigger than anything, by far bigger than anything in Europe. And then essentially Afghanistan is a big bunch of mountains with deserts to the northeast and south. And so, yeah, in winter, the snow. In the mountains, there's a lot of snow. Since 2011, we've taken people skiing in Afghanistan. And I could do a whole half-hour interview on the skiing. But essentially, if people are more interested in what that means, there's a film out called Champions of the Golden Valley. And Malala Yousafzai. Yeah. Do you remember Malala? Yeah, she's one of the producers. I was one of the producers as well of this film. Right. And it tells the story of basically the ski community in Afghanistan and the annual ski race that they have. And that's well worth a watch if people wanted to explore it more. So there's snow in the winter, and that snow feeds the rivers we talked about before, which feeds the irrigation. But once you get down to the deserts in the south, Kandahar and Helmand, I mean, it gets up to sort of 40 degrees in the summer. It's blisteringly hot.
You mentioned Malala, of course. What's the situation for women travellers there? Because, again, we will all think it's, you're basically, nothing but the eyes can be seen.
Well, the most important thing, what's it like for Afghan women in Afghanistan? Yeah. I think that's because any international woman, they're going to be there for a week or 2 weeks and leave. So for Afghan women, it's a really rough time. If you've grown up when the international community were there, you lived in a city, you were educated, you had a job, all that's been taken away. And it's really rough for Afghan women. We employed the first female tour guide ever in Afghanistan, a lady called Fatima from Herat. In 2021, she had to leave Afghanistan because she was under threat, and she now lives in Italy, where she does virtual tours for us. So she can still guide in Afghanistan, kind of, but virtually. And before the Taliban took over, we also helped organise this race a marathon in Afghanistan. We did that for 6 years, and to date it was still the only mixed-gender sporting event that's ever been held in the country. So all of that has stopped. So it's a really rough deal for Afghan women. That's an understatement. Yeah. For international women, it's not changed that much since the Taliban have taken over. I mean, people have to dress extremely conservatively, but they had to dress extremely conservatively before 2021. It's an extremely conservative country. And it was before the Taliban took over. So you'd have to wear a headscarf, loose-fitting clothes that reach that cover the up to the neck and the wrists and the ankles. And beyond that, if you're with a guide, that's fine. You have to travel around with another man, but all of our guests travel around with another man because they're with a guide or they're with a group.
Presumably, you can't be taking selfies everywhere and running around and going, "Hey guys, I'm here in Kandahar," because that's going to get unwanted attention. And as I said, it's a deeply conservative country.
It's a deeply. I think. I mean, there's a question about whether you should be doing that anywhere. To be honest, no, but seriously,
no, I'm with you on that one.
It's not a particular. There's a time and a place for doing that kind of thing. And if you're, say you're at the lakes at Bandimere, these interlocking lakes in the middle of the country that are this perfect blue, and you're there taking selfies and doing all of that, it's a normal place to take selfies. You know what I mean? Like, there are tourist places where that's absolutely fine. Of course, it's a spectacular scenery. Or it's a spectacular building, and doing some selfies in front of it is fine. If you go down to a bazaar and start doing sort of selfies in a little YouTube video in front of market stalls, I mean, try and doing that in Deptford or something like that in somewhere in London, they'd also tell you where to go. Do you know what I mean? Actually, they'd probably be much more polite about it in Afghanistan. So in that respect, Afghanistan's a bit like everywhere else. You want to do, you respect people. People are not props. Do you know what I mean? They're not props for your selfie. They're not props for your photos. And as long as you do that everywhere, I think you're fine. As long as you ask people and people give consent.
This is coming on the socials. I dismembered goat. We're talking about, was it Buzkashi?
Buzkashi.
A dismembered goat? 3 question marks. So if in Afghanistan they are yet to invent the ball, WTF?
I mean, it's a traditional game. I mean, there is obviously they have football teams. They have a very good cricket team, if you remember. So they are aware of the ball. The ball is something that exists. But people like these traditional games. It's their national sport, and they're very proud of it being their national sport.
So I mean, with a tool, presumably it's best to go with a tool because you're going to miss out on so much. And so, presumably, what you base yourself in outside Kabul, and then you say on a 7-day tour. I mean, you can't take it the whole country, but what are the sort of the highlights or the must-dos, as it were?
I think one place that people often go to is a place called Bamiyan in the centre of Afghanistan. It's about 4 or 5 hours drive west of Kabul. And Bamiyan was the place where the world's largest Buddhas used to be. And they were destroyed by the Taliban in 2001. But the niches that they were held in, and there's lots of caves there with what's reputed to be the world's earliest fresco paintings. There's not much of them left, but you can see all of that. The scenery there is spectacular, and there's these 5 huge interlocking lakes, the Travertine Lakes. So they all sit at different levels because of mineral deposits. There's a place called Pamukkale in Turkey, which is similar, but those lakes are very small, whereas these lakes are sort of, one of them's a couple of kilometres across. And that area is always spectacular. People often go there. And another place you would want to go to is Herat. Herat is near the Iranian border in the west of the country. And without getting too deep into history, although I know you like history, Giles, one of Central Asia's biggest figures is a guy called Tamerlane or Timur. Yeah. And he was based after Genghis Khan, he had the greatest empire Asia's ever seen.
What is it? So he based 34 years, didn't lose a battle, did it on one leg, basically.
Yeah, went all the way to China, to Delhi, to Cairo, to parts almost to Russia. And everyone he captured, he killed everyone, made big piles of skulls, but brought all the artisans back to Samarkand, which is now in Uzbekistan, and built this incredible capital. Well, his son, Shah Rukh, moved that capital to Herat. And his wife, a lady called Goa Shad, she commissioned these incredible buildings. So the Friday Mosque there was the largest mosque in the world for, I think, like 150 years or something. It's vast. There was this complex called the Masula complex, which was larger than the Registan, which is spectacular in Samarkand. Yeah. There's not much of it left. And there's this huge citadel there. And Herat, because it's quite closer to Iran, it's kind of the cultural capital of Afghanistan. So it's famous for having a lot of poets. It's hotter, so people go and sort of eat outside in restaurants, and it's just a bit more. It's just a great city, and the old city is kind of intact,
right?
And so you can walk around all these ancient sort of caravanserais, these kind of storage places where traders would come. Like, it's really got a lot of character. It's got a lot of stuff to see.
And presumably, like any other nation, once you get, especially with a culture, a nomad culture to a certain extent, or that area of culture, very hospitable once you get to know them.
Yeah. I'd say Afghan people are all that part of the world, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. There's the kind of hospitality is ingrained, like it's part of your. It's a bit like the Brits. The Brits like to buy around. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's our kind of like our way of doing hospitality. And I think in Afghanistan, typically, I mean, there's always exceptions to this. If you're a stranger and you're a guest, people are incredibly hospitable. Absolutely.
I could talk to you about this until the proverbial goats come home, but unfortunately going to run out of time. The book is called Afghanistan. It's one of the Bradt guides. It's the first one for 20 years, and it's by James Willcox, who's speaking today. James, if people want to find you on social media and find out more about all aspects of this, and you've really piqued my interest now, especially with Tamerlane, where can they find you online?
So I run this travel company called Untamed Borders. So you can find all of the Twitter, Facebook, and, oh God, I don't do a lot of social media myself. Instagram, they're all at Untamed Borders. You can go to the website. Anyone's interested, they can email info@Untamed Borders, and it'll work. If you want to speak to me, you can email me, and it'll work its way to me. I do have a little bit of my own social media, but I never use it. But the company one is the best way to go. Untamed Borders.
Somebody's just written a comment on socials. I'm very upset there aren't roaming flocks of Afghan hounds, but there you go. Listeners, go onto our virtual bookstore, click on the front cover, and it will be winging its way to you. The book is called Afghanistan. It's my Bradt travel guide. It's by James Willcox. James, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you this morning.
Thank you, Giles. Have a lovely day.